Good morning. Get the mic in the right spot. It's so terrific to be here, standing in the place where 5 years ago at the summit, nonprofit Westchester was launched. One of the most important things that the nonprofit sector has is its voice. We are in a unique position to talk about what our community needs in order to thrive. And I have some not so great news for you. You're doing it all wrong. But a couple of years ago, when I was striking around trying to find a new way to message for the nonprofit sector, one of my colleagues at the Human Services Council pointed me towards some new research that had just come out, commissioned by the National Human Services Assembly. And they did this amazing research that you're going to hear about from Ilsa Flanagan this morning. And we quickly incorporated it into our Keep Westchester Thriving campaign, which has been going for a couple of years now, to point to our big needs in the community and how we are meeting what is needed in our community. So I am going to stop trying to talk about the campaign and pass it over to the master, who can talk about the work that she has and how we can do it right and how we can be more powerful and more effective in our work. So without further ado, I want to introduce Ilsa Flanagan from the National Human Services Assembly.
Thank you. Good morning. So wonderful to be here. Do I need to do something to make my slides? There we go. Okay, magic. Okay, I just quickly wanted to thank Carlene and Alana and Joanna for having me here today to work with all of you for a full day. I'm super excited about it. And what I'm going to talk about Did I do something wrong? Can you hear? What, am I good? Okay. So we're going to talk about two things today, communications and connection. But I think what we'll do is stay away from the microphone. See, I learned. First thing we're going to do is talk about just the kind of current level of public discourse. And I kind of sum it all up in this. I mean, truly, this could be my life motto, really. But it does feel like we've kind of retreated to our ideological corners, right? And we're not moving. So lots of partisan bickering, throwing of facts and non-facts around. And that's a problem, because that means we can't really get anything done, right? So what I'm going to do today is answer kind of two questions. The first is, how do we get here? And what was our role, the nonprofit sector's role? What might we have done with our communications devices and language to help make this happen? And then talk about how do we move forward? You know, how do we design our communications to connect and engage, to help people hear us and understand us and learn and act? And I can answer those two questions because of research and science. So the National Human Services Assembly, who I work for, based in Washington, D.C., they are a national membership organization of kind of all the national federated health and human services nonprofits. So United Way Worldwide, American Red Cross, Boys and Girls Club, Volunteers of America, organizations like that. So several years ago, they were just getting increasingly frustrated, like all of you are, about the kind of deep and relentless funding cuts that we've been experiencing, the human services sector has been experiencing at every level, right? That, coupled with kind of flat charitable giving over the last 20 years, has left all of you, all of our organizations, really kind of ill-equipped to handle the complex problems that we are facing in our communities. And so we just felt like there must be another way to engage, or a better way to engage. And so we commissioned the Frameworks Institute with funding from Kresge Foundation and the Annie Casey Foundation And the Frameworks Institute is a nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C., and they really approach communications from like a multidisciplinary mindset. So they have anthropologists on staff, sociolinguists, sociologists, political scientists, psychologists, and they really look at communications from two perspectives. Large scale, what are the stories a culture tells about itself, and how does that persuade and influence? And kind of the individual scale, how do our brains process information, and how might we, or can we, change our minds, or change somebody else's mind? It's not easy. So the first thing that they do is they just look at kind of the world right now. So they want to understand, what does the public currently believe to be true about our work? What do they understand about human services? So I'm going to show you a series of man-on-the-street interviews that they did around the country as part of the first phase of the research to really get at that question. They would walk up to somebody on the street with a Starbucks gift card and say, do you have 10 minutes to talk to me? These are the people I avoid like the plague, right? But they did manage to get a lot of people to answer this question, and they did focus groups. And this is generally what you'll hear in this very short video, what we heard in the first phase of our research. And after this, there's some microphones floating around. I want to hear back from you, what you hear, what surprised you in this video, or what concerns you.
Why do you think that some people have more difficult lives than others?
Some people make their lives more difficult by the decisions that they make.
Individual choices.
The amount of work that you put in, I think.
Effort, motivation.
Some people, I think, make their own trouble.
People don't understand mostly is that what you do now affects later.
Wherever you end up, wherever you are at the time is a result of how much work that you invest.
They should also try and help themselves too. I think they shouldn't try and play the victim card.
Everybody has the option to change their destiny, and you have the power to have it better.
People have to help themselves.
A lot of it has to do with the situation of their parents, who you know, how much money you have.
A lot of it's about money.
Low wages.
Sometimes when you've lived in debilitating environments, you don't have a hope for support, and so you don't go after it.
You heard the phrase human services?
No.
Human services?
No, I
Have you heard
never
that
heard
phrase?
of it.
Is that a general term? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Human services?
Yeah.
We all serve each other.
The phrase human services pertains to people helping people.
Handing out food, clothes, different things.
Well, I do know they have the food.
They're always giving away food and supporting people in that way, I think.
For people who are not doing really well, like they don't have a place to live.
Very kind people.
There are people out there that are less fortunate than myself.
Charity organizations to help those that can't.
Health care for the homeless, or just the food kitchens.
If they're in a tough time, maybe money to help them get over whatever it is that they're trying to get through.
Surprise! What did you hear? Anybody? Yes. A lot of blaming the victim, that individuals kind of cause their own problems, whatever they might be. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. What else? Money. Money solves all problems. That's something else we heard in our research. When we asked people, what does it mean to do well? What does it mean if someone is thriving? What does that look like? That's all we heard. They have enough money. So what didn't we hear? We didn't hear social resources, friends, that kind of thing. We didn't hear mental well-being. We didn't hear, we heard physical well-being, but just a little bit. Money. Money solves all problems. What else? What'd they say about you guys? What? Nothing. Why do they think that you do the work that you do? Because you love it. Because you're good people. What's the problem with that? If they think that the reason you do this work is because you're a kind, compassionate person. They don't have to pay you then. They don't. That's exactly right. Then you're essentially a volunteer. You're doing this out of the goodness of your heart. We don't have to pay you. And guess what? In some places, like Illinois, where I come from, you're not getting paid because we haven't had a budget for 2 years. So these are the kinds of problems that we're trying to address in the new frame, in particular, this charity and compassion model, we really want to lift up the sector so that the public, and when I say public, that includes policymakers, they are people too, and funders and everybody else, sees you, the people that work in this sector, as just as important to a thriving society as the private sector and the public sector. This is hugely important. But we're also trying to expand the public's understanding of the work we do. And so at the end of the first phase of the research, what Frameworks did was they created reports, this is all online, and really map the gaps between what you guys know to be true, what the experts in the field know to be true about human services and the people we serve, but what the public believes. These gaps are hugely important because these are the gaps we need to close with the new frame. So this is just a few of them, but they're probably the ones that really can get in our way the most. So when we ask the public, what is human services? You heard in the video, right? Nobody really knows. But when they were able to kind of get their hands around it, what did they think it was? Food. Food, clothing, and shelter. So just direct temporary aid to the needy. Direct temporary aid to the needy. That's it. But guess what? We do lots of stuff. We do advocacy. We do prevention programs, completely invisible to the public. We do research. We want to expand the public's understanding of what we do because then it will get funded, right? Because these are the things we often have a really hard time getting investments in. Public, direct services. What causes, why might somebody need human services at some point in their life? Like we pretty much all do. You guys understand it's typically some kind of systemic breakdown, systemic inequality. Your neighborhood might not have a great school system, might not have good transportation, not a lot of jobs are available. These are systemic problems in our society that need to be solved. They're hard to convey. They're challenging to convey in communication, so we'll talk about that later today. But the public really sees that the individual causes their own problems. And I'm going to explain why that happens in a second. And then when I say, well, who's responsible for solving the problems? You guys know it's all of us. There's a civic responsibility. You can't do it on your own. You partner with the government. You partner with the private sector. We all have a role to play. But in general, the public doesn't see that, which is why it's hard to engage them, because they don't see themselves in the solution. Individual causes their own problems, then they should solve them. I mean, we are hearing this loud and clear today in the public discourse. And then, probably maybe most important is who benefits. When we ask all of you, and we did, we asked members of our organization, all these questions, who benefits from the services that we provide in our community? You understand that everybody does. Even if I am not a recipient at this time in my life, it benefits me if maybe one of my neighbors is a recipient and they're doing better, right? It benefits the north side of Chicago if the south side of Chicago is thriving. These things are all connected. The public doesn't see that. They don't see it. And this is really part of the kind of makers versus takers mentality in the public discourse today, Like, why are my taxes going to pay for that person getting that health care or that food, which makes it really hard to build support for the work that you do. So you see some of the challenges that we have here. So how does this play out in our communications? I'm just going to show you a quick example. This is from the field. I'll share a lot more later today in the workshops of, we might design a really innocuous statement. In these tough times, people need more support, not less. This is no time to cut funding to human service issues. Right? You think, well, who wouldn't support that idea? But guess what? This gets translated in the public's brains, in your audience's brains. This is what they hear from Frameworks research. In tough economic times, people who get those programs have a better quality of life than the rest of us. Must be nice. Sound familiar? Have you had this argument? The kind of othering, like people don't see themselves as part of the work that you do or as a beneficiary of the work you do, kind of makers versus takers in there. A real misperception of why it's important to help people that are in need and how we all benefit. So, why does this happen? Oh, let me go back for a second. So I mentioned before that frameworks kind of looks at two different things, right? So they look at kind of large scale and individual scale. And the individual scale, they look at neuroscience, brain research from the last couple of decades. So I have summed up all that research into one cartoon, which will irritate any scientist in the room. But this is how much I understand about the brain research. Right? I mean, Exhibit A, Thanksgiving. I mean, we've all experienced this. So the first is that our brains have evolved to process information really quickly, so quickly that it's mostly unconscious, right? On top of that, we understand from the brain research that it's really hard to dislodge an existing belief. And beliefs are created, they're formed at a really young age, and they are just reinforced over time, regardless of what they hear. Whether they hear something in support of that belief or in opposition to it, it's reinforced. So it's almost impossible to dislodge an existing belief. And basically, facts on their own are not effective communication devices. So we will often think about just throwing enough data or facts at somebody, I can change their mind. This is something I try to do every year at Thanksgiving. It doesn't work. The other thing frameworks looked at are larger, these kind of cultural models, things that, stories that are created over generations in a culture that really, they motivate thought and behavior. And the cultural model, and they're kind of deeply and widely held. So even if you move here, why are you waving at me? I'm not sure why. 5 minutes? Oh, good. Oh, that's not good. Okay. So this is what happens, sorry. So cultural models, deeply and widely held over time. And we cue them up in our communications without realizing it, and some of them are really unproductive for us, particularly this one. Anybody know what I'm getting at here? No. Well, kind of. What does the Marlboro Man stand for? Yes, rugged individualism. That you can come to this country with the clothes on your back and be Oprah. Right? I mean, that's what it is. So you hear it all the time. I pulled myself up on my bootstraps. I came from nothing. I became this or I became that. And those are the exceptions. But guess what? We reinforce those exceptions every time we put an individual story in our communications. The individual story of success or struggle does us no favors. And this is where I get the most resistance from people, and I'm here for you. Come at me. So we will be talking about this afternoon. This is a huge problem, though. The other one is this. Do you know what I'm getting at? Doom and gloom. Sky is falling. I like to think that my people, the Irish, brought this to your country. It's called fatalism. And we often start our communications, like the prime real estate of your communications, like the first two sentences, right? So we start it with like, people are dying on the streets. There's 50,000 homeless people. Some of them have drug addiction. Some of them are mental ill, and people will immediately disengage. Why? That feels too big to solve. I've got to get to work. I've got to drop my kid off at daycare. My boss is driving me crazy. I've got a health appointment to worry about. I can't worry about this. And I would say in the last 3 months, there's more and more and more of that, right? We are overwhelmed. It breeds skepticism, and that means people, again, will retreat to their ideological corners. And what we want is a reasonable tone, because that will jolt people back into the persuadable middle, which is where we want to meet them. And that is what the frame is set up to do. Okay, so what can we do? So just really quickly, we did a lot of research. I'm not going to go into it right now since I only have a few minutes left. But we did framework surveyed about 5,000 people across the country to test the new frame. Well, what should we be talking about? What should we be emphasizing? And we measured against those outcomes, which are hugely important. Did it change attitudes about the people we serve? Did it expand knowledge about human services and what we do beyond direct service? Did it trigger policy support? Were people willing to call the governor or call Congresswoman to ask them to vote in support of investments in our programs? So these are big outcomes. And what is framing? So framing is essentially, stories, we tell stories to make meaning out of the world, our place in it, why things happen the way they do. And frames are simply a series of choices that you make about those stories. What to leave in, what to leave out, what to emphasize. Okay? And and along with that is kind of tone, that reasonable tone, and order. And another thing you want to remember at all times, thinking back to that slide with the cartoon, you are not your audience. You are not your audience. So when you are writing your communications, you're immersed in the work, in the jargon. We were talking about this last night. And you think everybody gets it. They don't. And then you try to cram, and people always say to me, Ilsa, how can I explain everything I do in like a two-sentence elevator speech? I'm like, you can't. Stop trying. Stop trying. Here's what you do instead. You want to answer 4 questions. The first question you always want to answer, really, in kind of any dialogue that you're in, why should I even be listening to you? Why does this matter to me? Why should I care? We often start with the what we do, what the problem is. You want to start with the why. Why should you care? And you always answer that question with a value. Values motivate decision making. There's a political party that does this really well. Really well, and we can learn from that. We tested several values, just like we tested every element of this. The one that was the most productive for us is the value of human potential. Everybody deserves to reach their full potential. And when they do, they will contribute to their community. This is hugely motivating, and it requires almost no explanation. People automatically get that you cannot reach your full potential on your own. You will need help at different points in your life. That's where you guys come in. They get that everyone's potential looks different. Not everybody's is graduating from college, having a 40-hour-a-week job with benefits. It's just not. These are all things that are intuitive in that potential. The other question, and then we get into, well, how do we help people reach their full potential? What do you guys do? How do we explain that? Jargon-free. We use metaphors. Metaphors are communications devices that we all use all the time. How are you feeling today? I feel like I'm pushing a big boulder up a hill. You don't even think about it. But metaphors are easy ways to explain complex ideas, and the work we do is complex. And we use metaphors already. Safety net, not allowed to use that anymore. You'll find out in the next workshop why. And a few other ones that are problematic for us. But the one that was the most productive was this idea that we build well-being, just like you build a house. People automatically understand it takes lots of people to build a house, so it takes a lot of people to build well-being, that you don't just build a house and walk away. It requires maintenance, sometimes major repairs. So people will understand why some people might need interventions at a certain point in their life. They also understand that if it's not working, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's because shaky foundation. Maybe you didn't get what you needed as a kid, and you don't have as much resilience as you need as an adult. Maybe you lost your job because it was a recession, no fault of your own, lost a spouse, need help, lost some income, whatever it is. So this allows people, the public, to put the blame and responsibility on the system, not on the person, okay? And then we always close with the solution. We often set up the problem, and we don't often say what the solution is, but we know. And if we don't know, we know how to find out. That's how we engage. That fatalism slide, that sense of urgency that we feel, and I get that, urgency disengages. It disengages. Okay, so what does this look like? I'll just show you really quickly an example. So this is a short example from the field of a poorly framed press release. So as lawmakers wrestle with the budget, funding for vital services are at risk of being gutted. The cuts proposed would shut the door to critical services for hundreds of thousands of families across the state. But then what? Families in need are not going away, and our elected officials need to do their jobs. We need a budget that's prudent, reasonable, and doesn't end up costing more than it saves. Cutting in the dark is never a good idea. What's wrong with this, do you think? Do you think anything's wrong with it? It's very negative. When I show the longer version, and I will later today, I ask people how they feel after they read it. They say they feel kind of depressed or angry or just like, ugh, I don't know what to do about this. When we use that kind of language, it doesn't motivate. The other thing in here that we do that really gets in our way is we insult lawmakers. I know. Like, I know. So you don't want to do that. The government is corrupt, is a very strong cultural model in this country. It really is. We don't want to cue it up in our communications because they're your partner. You work with them. For some of you, it's your major funder. It's not productive. And again, it allows people to just retreat to their ideological corners. You want to meet them in the middle, policymakers and the public. So here's the reframe. As our policymakers use our most important civic tool for peering into the future, our public budget, we must make it a priority to attend to our nation's most important asset, our human potential. When we support well-being, we ensure everyone can contribute to our communities. A good budget meets our needs today and plans for the future. So let's keep in mind that we need everyone's potential for the civic, social, and economic well-being of our communities. What do you think?
I like it.
Thank you. I once had a guy, I was at a conference in LA talking about this, at a guy from New York City. After he read that, he's like, Ilsa, this is all puppies and rainbows. And I was like, oh, my people, because I'm from the East Coast. People don't get me in Chicago. And I said, yeah, it is. And that's by design. That's by design. Anything else jump out at you on this? Yes. Sure. So I will show the full press release at the next workshop, so it does feel a little vague. I hear you on that. We actually put some explanatory examples in there to open it up. I will mention to you really quickly that we did test the economic example for the fourth question that you put in your story, because we often use that. Like, if you invest this money now, you'll save money later. Yeah, wasn't very productive for people. It didn't motivate people. What motivated them was seeing how human services helps people across the lifespan. So those are the kinds of examples we recommend. Anything else in here? The other thing I really like about this, and I'll tell you, all these examples are on our website. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint with you. We want you to plagiarize. Like, take the language that we're using, use it, adapt it. I really like how this makes the budget more real for people. Because budget is such a dry thing, it's hard to get people excited about it. But once you start to put real life examples, which again I'll share later, around it, it can really activate. Okay, so last slide. What did we learn today? 4 things I want you to remember. You are not your audience. So be careful when you're around the room with your team, coming up with communications, because you're the experts, you're immersed in this, you know what's going on, then you like, blah, dump it all on this piece of paper. And then people are like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't know what you do, I don't know why I should care about this. So be really careful to follow those 4, make sure you answer those 4 questions. You are not your audience. And people don't come to us with blank slates. They come with all those cultural models, those existing beliefs. Their brains operate really quickly. So we had to catch them. That very first question, why should I care? That's how you hook them. Okay, are you with me? Okay, thank you. Facts are not effective on their own. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Because I just feel like over the last 10 years, data has been such a big thing. Like, we're collecting data like crazy. We have all this amazing data. Like, I get it. I get it. But we just throw numbers at people and facts, thinking surely if they knew what the problem was, surely if they understood climate change, they would care. Right? Wrong. Not effective. Again, Thanksgiving. This happened to all of us. Be the voice of reason. Reasonable tone will just go, it will get you halfway. It's really, you want to jolt people out of the mindset that everybody is in, say, I'm either a Republican or I'm a Democrat, and I'm coming at it from that perspective. That's not helpful. When we tested this frame, we tested against age, race, income, political ideology. The frame rises above all of that. It's intended to reach everybody. Okay? Last one, answer that first question, why should I care? Why should I care? Okay, so that's just a really quick overview. We're going to talk more about this in the morning and the afternoon workshop, so I hope to see some of you there. I don't know if we have time, Colleen, for any further questions. I know we're... Are there any burning questions? You've got to know before I walk off the stage? No, people are like, I need my coffee, go away. You're done with me? All right, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.